The swamp gave back what it had swallowed, but not what everyone was waiting for. 12 years after 4 teenage athletes vanished without a trace, an old SUV surfaced from black. Stagnant water on the outskirts of a forgotten town. No bodies, no seats, no engine, only silence. And questions no one wanted answered. Be sure to subscribe for more chilling tales, keeping you current on all things criminal. This is Crime Hall. In the fall of 2009, the town of Ridgewood Falls was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and nothing truly bad ever seemed to happen. That's why no one panicked when Evan Brooks, Lucas Reed, Noah Turner, and Caleb Morris borrowed Evan's uncle's SUV to drive to late-night football conditioning. They were 16, talented, ambitious, and convinced the future was already calling their names. Evan drove, even though he didn't have a license. In Ridgewood Falls, that wasn't unusual. Parents trusted the roads, coaches trusted the boys, and the town trusted its own illusion of safety. They never arrived. By 9:30 p.m., the training field lights were still on, but the boys weren't there. By midnight, parents were calling police. By morning, the town was holding its breath. There was no crash, no skid marks, no broken glass, no emergency calls. Security cameras caught the SUV passing a gas station on Old River Highway, and then nothing. Search teams scoured forests, canals, abandoned roads, and lakes. Divers searched water after water. Helicopters flew grid patterns so tight they bordered on desperation. The SUV was gone, and so were the boys. Rumors exploded that it could be a hit and run covered up, a carjacking gone wrong, a secret runaway pact. None of it fit. These boys had plans, scholarships, futures. The case slowly froze. 12 years later, 2 fishermen pulled something heavy from their nets. An engine. Its serial number matched a vehicle reported missing in 2009. Divers returned to the swamp, a foul, forgotten wetland miles from any main road. And there it was, the SUV, or what was left of it. No engine, no rear seats, no steering wheel, no license plates. The roof had been cut off by hand. Not torn, not crushed, cut. Someone had worked carefully, deliberately. Attention turned to Marcus Hale, the boys' former coach. Respected, charismatic, ambitious. He had scheduled the late practice. He had resigned 1 month after the disappearance, and he had left town without saying goodbye. When police finally tracked him down years later, he lived alone, avoided neighbors, and refused to answer questions. Then something surfaced online, an auction listing, 4 old team jerseys, 4 names stitched into the fabric. The missing boys. An anonymous package arrived at the police station. Inside was a photo of the boys standing beside a bus. On the back, written in black marker, they trusted the wrong person. That was the night Marcus Hale finally spoke. He claimed he'd been approached by a man promising exposure, funding, and elite training opportunities. A private program off the books. Fast-tracked careers. Hale admitted he agreed. Admitted he arranged the meeting. Admitted he accepted money. But he swore he never meant for them to disappear. When asked where the boys were now, he whispered, "I don't know." And that's what haunts me. The swamp keeps its silence. The SUV tells no story. The boys were never found. And somewhere, someone still has their jerseys, waiting. The moment news broke that the SUV had been recovered, Ridgewood Falls stopped breathing. For 12 years, the case had lived quietly in people's minds. Something painful, unresolved, but distant enough to survive. Now it was back, crawling out of the swamp like a ghost refusing to stay buried. Parents locked their doors earlier than usual. Old arguments resurfaced. Names people hadn't spoken in years were whispered again. And one name rose above all others: Marcus Hale. Detectives reopened every file connected to Hale's time at Ridgewood High. They noticed patterns no one had focused on before. Hale had privately trained only the 4 missing boys. He'd logged unofficial sessions outside school hours. He'd argued repeatedly with the school board about wasted talent. He'd once been overheard saying, "If they stay here, they'll disappear into nothing." At the time, it sounded motivational. Now it sounded prophetic. Former players were questioned. Some praised him. Others hesitated. One former teammate finally said what no one else would. He was obsessed with making it big, not just for us, for himself. Investigators dug into Hale's financial records. 12 days before the boys vanished, he deposited $47,000 in cash. No employer listed, no contract attached, no explanation. The deposit coincided exactly with the date he ordered custom jerseys, 5 of them. 4 players, 1 coach. The 5th jersey bore his own name. Why order a jersey for himself? Why never collect it? Using old GPS mapping and witness reports, detectives reconstructed a possible route the boys could have taken that night. It wasn't the fastest way. It wasn't even logical, but it led directly toward the swamp and past an abandoned industrial storage zone near the river. A place locals avoided, a place with no cameras, a place with warehouses that had changed ownership so often. Records barely existed. One retired officer finally spoke up. He remembered a tip that had been dismissed years earlier. A woman named Rachel Boone. She lived near the dirt road that cut toward the swamp. Rachel Boone had called police at 10:58 p.m. the night the boys vanished. She reported metallic banging, shouting, a vehicle idling for a long time. Then, silence. Officers arrived 40 minutes later. They found nothing. At the time, they assumed it was hunters or scrap thieves. Now, standing on the same road years later, investigators realized something chilling. If a car had been disabled there, the swamp was the perfect dumping ground. Forensic experts took another look at the SUV. This wasn't panic. This was professional dismantling. Engine removed cleanly. Seats unbolted, not ripped. Roof cut to avoid structural collapse. Whoever did this knew cars, and they worked fast. A search of old criminal records revealed a name. Victor Klein, former auto body technician, served time for illegal vehicle modification. Released 6 months before the disappearance. Last known address, less than 2 miles from the swamp. Victor Klein was found living in a trailer outside town. He denied involvement, passed a polygraph, but something didn't add up. When asked about Marcus Hale, Klein paused just for a second, then said, "I don't know that name." But phone records showed otherwise. 3 calls, all within a week of the disappearance. Just as pressure mounted, another online listing appeared. A single jersey this time. Same stitching, same names, but this time there was a note in the description. They weren't meant to come back. The account vanished within minutes. Whoever was doing this wasn't trying to make money. They were trying to send a message. Evan Brooks's younger sister finally went public. She revealed something she'd never told police. The night Evan disappeared, he'd texted her. "Coach says tonight changes everything." She thought he meant football. Now she wasn't so sure. Investigators began quietly discussing a terrifying possibility. What if the boys weren't victims of an accident? What if they were delivered, handed off to someone else? And what if the SUV wasn't destroyed to hide a crime, but to erase a transaction? Then came the call, a distorted voice. Just 6 words. "Stop digging or you're next." The line went dead, and for the first time in 12 years, detectives realized something horrifying. Whoever took the boys might still be watching. The call wasn't reported immediately, not because detectives didn't take it seriously, but because they weren't sure who to trust anymore. The voice had known details only investigators and families should have known. That meant one of 2 things. Either the caller had access to police files, or someone close to the case was leaking information. Both possibilities were terrifying. A decision was made quietly. From this moment on, the investigation would be handled by a sealed internal unit, with no digital records accessible outside the task force. While one team focused on threats, another re-examined the financial activity surrounding the disappearance. Marcus Hale wasn't the only one who'd received unexplained money. A clerk at a regional bank remembered something odd. In the same week, Hale deposited his $47,000. 2 other deposits were made, one into an account belonging to Ridgewood Athletic Association, another into a shell company called Northline Consulting. Neither transaction had raised red flags at the time. Now they looked deliberate. The shell company didn't officially exist anymore, but 12 years ago, it had one listed director, a man named Calvin Ross. Too clean. No criminal history, no long-term address, no known relatives. Yet he had served as a sports development consultant in multiple small towns. Each time, promising opportunities, each time leaving abruptly, each time followed by unresolved rumors. Detectives realized something chilling. Ridgewood Falls might not have been the first stop. Using archived reports and media databases, investigators uncovered 4 eerily similar cases over a span of 15 years. Talented teenage athletes, unofficial training programs, private scouting opportunities, vehicles abandoned or destroyed, no confirmed bodies. The towns were different, the sports varied, but the structure was identical. This wasn't coincidence, it was a system. A forensic breakthrough shifted everything. Hidden inside one of the SUV's door frames, technicians found traces of industrial sealant, not factory standard. The vehicle had been modified to transport something concealed, or someone. The missing seats weren't removed after the fact. They'd been taken out before the boys ever left that night, meaning the SUV was never meant to be driven to practice. It was meant to go somewhere else. Using phone data, witness reports, and route analysis, investigators built a new timeline. The boys were told to meet for a special opportunity. They were directed toward the river road. They stopped at the industrial zone. Something went wrong. Rachel Boone's account of shouting now made sense. This wasn't a transfer. It was a confrontation. Under pressure, Marcus Hale finally admitted more. He said the deal had been supposed to be temporary, a showcase, a trial weekend, but when he arrived late to the meeting location, he found only tire marks and blood on the ground. He claimed he panicked, and instead of calling police, he made the worst decision of his life. He walked away. Confronted with evidence linking Northline Consulting to multiple disappearances, Hale finally spoke a name he'd avoided for years. Calvin Ross wasn't real. It was an alias. The man he knew went by another name in private circles, a name whispered among underground recruiters. Ethan Crow. Crow wasn't a trafficker in the traditional sense. He specialized in something harder to trace: ownership contracts. Young athletes signed away rights they didn't understand. When families pushed back, Crow disappeared. When players resisted, they vanished. Not all of them survived, but enough did to keep the system running. Investigators finally understood the jerseys. They weren't souvenirs. They were receipts. Proof. Someone had kept them as leverage. And now, 12 years later, they were being used to force a confession or start a war. Evidence pointed to someone who'd been there the entire time. Not a criminal, not a coach, a facilitator, someone who'd seen the boys last and survived. Their name was never in the headlines, but it was in every file, and the task force finally noticed it. As detectives prepared arrest warrants, one final message arrived. Not a threat this time. A location, coordinates, near the river, with 6 words attached. You're finally looking in the right place. The coordinates led investigators to a stretch of riverbank no one had searched seriously before. Not because it was hidden, but because it looked ordinary. An abandoned loading dock, rust-eaten railings, collapsed concrete. For years, locals had assumed it was just another relic of Ridgewood's industrial past. But crime scenes aren't always dramatic. Sometimes they hide in plain sight. Ground-penetrating radar revealed disturbances beneath the dock, not graves. Storage pits, old industrial pits once used for waste disposal, later sealed and forgotten. Excavation began quietly. No media, no families, just silence and dread. The first object uncovered wasn't human. It was metal. A bent car door frame, paint matched to the SUV. Then came fabric, a strip of athletic tape, a cleat sole. Time stopped. The boys had been here. Deeper excavation revealed bone fragments, not intact remains, separated, scattered deliberately. A forensic anthropologist delivered the conclusion no parent ever recovers from. This was not an accident. This was disposal. The swamp wasn't the crime scene. It was the cover. The mystery of the SUV's roof was finally solved. Investigators realized the car had been used as temporary containment. The roof was cut later to retrieve something or someone, not the boys. Evidence, anything linking the vehicle to the transfer point near the river. The car wasn't destroyed in panic. It was dismantled with intent. The name investigators had overlooked belonged to a man named Dennis Rowe. He wasn't a criminal. He was a logistics contractor. He coordinated transport, warehouse access, and unofficial facilities. And 12 years ago, he'd logged a delivery to the abandoned dock. The cargo description was blank. When confronted, Rowe broke. He hadn't spoken in 12 years. He said he'd been hired to supervise the transfer. 4 teenagers arrived. They argued. They realized something was wrong. One of them tried to run. That's when everything collapsed. Rowe claimed he panicked when violence broke out. He fled and spent the rest of his life waiting for the knock. Rowe confirmed what investigators feared. Ethan Crow had been there. Crow didn't touch the boys. He didn't need to. He gave instructions, and when it went wrong, he vanished. Marcus Hale was brought in again. This time there was nowhere left to hide. He admitted he'd known the location, admitted he'd suspected the truth, admitted he'd stayed silent to protect himself. I thought if I said nothing, it would all disappear. It didn't. Dennis Rowe was charged. Marcus Hale was arrested for conspiracy and obstruction. Warrants were issued across 3 states. The system that fed on talent had finally been exposed. But one man remained missing. Ethan Crow was gone. No financial trail, no digital footprint, no confirmed identity. Some believed he'd died. Others believed he'd simply changed names again, just like before. The hardest task came last. Parents were brought into a room. They were told the truth. Not all of it, but enough. There were no survivors, only answers, and even those came too late. The dock was sealed. The pits were closed. The swamp was drained for the last time. Nothing more was found, but the town never forgot. The jerseys were returned to the families. No longer evidence, no longer symbols of hope, just reminders. Ridgewood Falls went quiet again. But this time, the silence meant something different. It meant the truth had finally surfaced, even if justice never fully did. The courtroom was full long before the doors officially opened. Parents sat in the front row. Former students filled the benches. Cameras waited outside, but were never allowed in. The case of Ridgewood Falls versus Marcus Hale and Dennis Rowe wasn't about proving innocence anymore. It was about assigning blame in a story where everyone had failed. Dennis Rowe was the first to testify. He no longer looked like the man who once coordinated logistics for private contractors. His hair was gray. His hands shook. His voice cracked under oath. He admitted everything. He had coordinated the location. He had supervised the transfer. He had seen the boys arrive alive. But he insisted on one thing. I didn't know they were going to die. The courtroom went silent. Rowe described how one of the boys realized something was wrong and tried to run. Another screamed. Someone struck him to stop him. That was when panic turned into brutality. Rowe fled and never looked back. Marcus Hale took the stand next. Unlike Rowe, he tried to explain himself. He spoke about ambition, about feeling trapped in a dying town, about believing he was giving the boys a chance at something bigger. But the prosecutor didn't let him hide behind excuses. You didn't sell opportunity, she said. You sold access. Hale broke down. He admitted he'd ignored warning signs, admitted he'd taken money, admitted he'd lied to parents. But when asked if he knew the boys would die, he whispered, "No, but I knew something wasn't right." That was enough. Dennis Rowe accepted a plea deal. Multiple counts of conspiracy, accessory to violent crime, obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 35 years without parole. Marcus Hale wasn't so fortunate. The jury took less than 6 hours. He was found guilty on all counts. As he was led away, no one looked at him, not even the families. Ethan Crowe was never arrested. Not officially, not unofficially. Every lead collapsed. Every alias dissolved. Some believed he was dead. Others believed he had simply moved on, using a new name, a new town, and new victims. The system he built had been damaged, but not proven destroyed. Once the trial ended, the silence shattered. National outlets descended on Ridgewood Falls. Headlines screamed, "Hidden sports pipeline linked to teen disappearances." Coach convicted in 12-year-old cold case. How talent became currency. Other families from other towns came forward. Stories surfaced. Different names. Same promises, same disappearances. Ridgewood Falls had not been unique. It had been one chapter. No sentence brought peace. Parents visited memorial sites by the river. Some placed jerseys on crosses. Others refused to attend anything public ever again. One mother said quietly to a reporter, "Justice didn't bring my son home. It just told me why he never will." The jerseys were framed, not hung in gyms, not displayed at school. They were kept in private homes, away from cameras, away from curiosity, because they no longer symbolized dreams. They symbolized trust that was abused. The abandoned dock was demolished. The swamp was fenced off. A plaque was placed near the river, in memory of 4 young lives lost, and a reminder that silence can be deadly. Tourists eventually stopped coming, but locals never forgot. The case is officially listed as resolved. But one question still lingers. If Ethan Crowe could vanish once, if the system worked across states, if the jerseys resurfaced after 12 years, then maybe someone out there still knows more. And maybe one day, another package will arrive. 4 boys drove to training believing in their future. The swamp gave back their car, but the truth took 12 years to surface. And even then, it came too late.